Well, I'm here with Jean Watt in her home on Harbor Island. And Jean has been Citizen of the Year, named most influential person in the whole area. So my first question is, where's the throne?
Where's the throne?
All right, that isn't really my first question.
Yeah.
If you know Jean, you know that she's not interested in thrones. You have been at the center of so many of the environmental activities in the city over the years. So let's start with just sort of how did you get involved? What was the trigger that said, I need to do more?
So I've thought about that a lot, and I would say the absolute trigger was in 1972 when my friend Nancy Skinner asked me to help with a council election for someone that the environmental group wanted to elect. And so I did that, and I think I have just evolved. I think you are planted somewhere and things evolve. And I was lucky because I had gotten to a point where my children were in high school and college, and all of a sudden people started asking me to do things. And it kind of went from there. So what happened was we lost the election, and I said what I took from that was you can't just pop up at election time and expect to elect somebody. You have to have some kind of a group endeavor, some kind of a mission that you want to achieve, and keep at it and do it over time. So, but I didn't really see myself doing anything like that. I just said that. And then a couple of years later, one of my neighbors, this was the thing that just got us all started in the 70s was pollution. It was the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and it was all kind of simmering in your mind about what is this, what do we do about it, how do I affect anything in my own community. So my neighbor got on my case one day about what are we going to do about this bay? It's just filled with trash and debris that's coming down. And so she said, we've got to make the council do something. We've got to make our homeowners groups do something. And I said, I think you're going to have to do it yourself, or you're going to have to stimulate the interest in it. So she said, fine. She would start a group, and if I would help her. And I'm always happy to help. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. I helped Nancy Gardner.
She's helped. I must say, before we go any farther, that Jean has mentored more people that have gone on to become involved in either city politics or in environmental groups. It's a long, long list, and she has a great eye. I sound like I'm congratulating myself, but you do. You have a good eye for identifying people who actually do things, who will follow through. Because I think one of the things I've noticed, and you've probably noticed as well, is that it's easy to get initial enthusiasm from people, but to get the people that will keep coming back, that's quite a challenge.
I do, and it's kind of embarrassing because some people avoid me like the plague.
They know. It's very hard to resist. I've heard that from more people, and I can say for a fact that when Jean asks you to do something, you do it. But I think part of that is just a compliment to you that you have such a good record, that you've always been very reasonable on your stands, that you've always been willing to listen and to discuss and have dialogue. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. It's not just, hey, my way or the highway. And so people are more willing to at least give you that first listen, and then you suck them in.
That's right. But more than that, I think in the 70s, it was just there. The community was ready to do something about the bay, for one thing. And so it was very easy to formulate a plan and strategy, get people together. We started the weekly cleanup, and so forth and so on. And that eventually, I mean, my goal was always to, if I think I'm sort of a sucker because people come and you hear this over and over, people worried about something. And my feeling always is, well, what are we going to do about it? And so in that case, we formed Spawn. And I didn't really like the name. It was a little combative, stop polluting our Newport. But it worked because people were really upset about the pollution, actually, at that time. And so I see it now. What's interesting, at that time, it really was truly about pollution. Then it became the airport. It was about noise. It was about saving open space, and it was about traffic. It was very clear what the problems were, and they were fairly significant. And then now we come to fast forward to right now, and we have this odd thing going on because we have a pretty good community, and we've institutionalized, so to speak, all of the things we do to clean up the bay and solve the airport problem, or try to, and we're all working together on it, the community and the government. But all of a sudden, there's this growth thing that has hit people in the face, and they are surprisingly willing to fight for some objective, which is yet to be determined, I think.
Well, this happened before. I mean, if we go back to Greenlight, and I know you were very involved with Greenlight, and that was basically a growth issue, a concern that the city was sort of losing its character and that sort of thing. So this isn't, I think certain things, it goes around after a while, that things sort of, you pass something, watch it take hold, and then gradually you feel like maybe things are changing again and that. But let's go back before we get into that. Let's go back to some of the other groups. So you had Spawn, Stop Polluting Our Newport. But then after the bankruptcy, the county bankruptcy, I know there was some concerns, and there was another group that you were very instrumental in starting.
Well, it was the same thing over again in a way. For years, we had these groups parochially in cities. We had Spawn here, we had Laguna Greenbelt, we had ones up in the Brea area trying to save the Chino Hills. And so we know each other, and we had been talking for years about having a county-wide environmental group that could be a little more vocal in a broader sense and be more effective. But nobody had time to do it. And after I got off the council, I was sitting here thinking nothing particularly when someone called about why didn't we form this countywide group. And it all fell together because of the bankruptcy at the county and the county not being able to pay for their executive director and so forth and so on. And so I stepped into that void, partially because it had been there for a long time and bugging us all. And I have that facility to solve problems. And if I can, my husband used to say, well, raise the flag and see who salutes. And so I did, and I asked people, and they wanted to do it, and we got together. So we have Friends of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks, which has been very successful in mapping an objective. So mapping an objective that met all sorts of people's needs so that it was not something you were fighting for politically, you were fighting for just to be able to save these spaces. And so we have a green map, a green vision. We've been collaborative with...
I would say you've been very collaborative. Friends of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks, what I think is unique about that group is, I mean, you have like the Audubon Society that focuses on birds, and you have Surf Rider that focuses on certain aspects of like beach access and the beaches. But this really brings together a diverse group. I mean, you've got the equestrians, for example, and I don't know that they had ever been working with, say, people who were concerned about coastal access and that. So that's really been remarkable.
I think we all feel good about that particular organization because it has been able to work even with SCAG, for instance, the Southern California Association of Governments, in developing policies that, in fact, what I see, we have these laws, and they're only use the Clean Water Act as an example, but we have regulatory laws, and they're only as good as the people in the communities make them. And in the case of open space, nobody doubts the value of it in many cases, but how you're going to save it is another matter altogether. And it's usually a matter of money. And so we've been able to work with the Sustainable Community Strategies. One of the strategies for sustainable community is saving conservation land. And so now we have developed the ability to work with transportation agencies, so when there is a mitigation, we all know what we're going to save. So we feel good about, as I say, the collaborative nature of it.
Now, I know one of the big issues in our city some years ago was when there was a proposal to transform the upper bay, the back bay, into a marina. And this galvanized the community in any way, and you were also involved with that. And again, how did that group come about?
Well, that was, I get credit for things I didn't do. That was Frank Robinson.
But you were still involved.
A little bit. But that was part of the stimulus for me to get involved, is the Robinsons saw that. They saw that wetlands as being something that should be public or access to the public. And they were way ahead of their time because 30 years later, everybody sees it that way. But anyway, they formed Friends of Newport Bay before I ever got started with any of my activities. And then I became part of that. And those people were, we look at them as the leaders of the environmental group in our area.
It's remarkable. Now, when you were on the council, you had certain committees and things, and you were able to do some different things. Compare. I mean, it's all. I found it very interesting. They go from being a proponent of something and speaking to the council to suddenly being on the council. It's a really different perspective. How did you handle that change?
Well, it's easier to be on the council. It's very hard to be a person that's speaking to the council. And I've always said people should appreciate that people are willing to do that. I mean, from my perspective, it's very hard to do. I don't even know how to express it, but being on the council, I just felt like I wanted to pay attention, and I didn't have a problem listening to people there or even speaking out. And when I was on the council, I was a minority, let's say, and yet the good thing was they recognized my interest in the environmental part of things, and so they let me be on those committees, and I could do what I could do. So I don't know if that answers you.
Well, no, I do think it does because, yeah, I mean, I had the same experience, I think, of saying, I felt, though, that because I tried to work with my colleagues, that then they would work with me. And, you know, I don't think there's anything like the Clean Water Act I could point to, but I still felt that there were some things I could accomplish.
Exactly, and you did. You were perfect. You did a better job than I did.
No, this is not the way we're supposed to be going here. So Let's bring it a little bit more up to date. That you have been involved with a group. I would say it's a new group, but it's not that new really, because you and Louise Greeley started it quite a while ago. But it's called Orange Coast River Park. So tell us a little bit about that and how it came to be.
Well, that was Bob Fisher was the director of harbors, beaches, and parks at the county in the 60s. No. This is in the 80s. And there was a fellow that was the chairman or the executive director for the Coastal Conservancy, whose name was Reed Holderman. And the two of them had this brilliant idea to form the Orange Coast River Park at the mouth of the Santa Ana River. After it was determined that there wouldn't be a marina there, it was sort of up for grabs. And there's 3 cities in the county have jurisdiction over it, own the property there, along with the Banning Ranch. So it was a already public open space in large part, but with some private that had to be incorporated into it. And so it was their idea. They drew a map, and then they talked to me about it. And then so that was while Bob was still the director up there. Then he got fired because of the bankruptcy, and then we had him come and be the executive director for the Friends of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks. And his first order of business was to carry on what he'd started at the county. So he suggested forming the Orange Coast River Park Committee. And let's see, that was it. So 20 years later, here we are, still working on it, but it has taken on a role in the community that people recognize, and it will be a regional park that has certain aspects of it that are complementary to the whole system, trails and natural features.
So looking back since the beginning of your involvement, what would you say a couple of the highlights that you really look to say that really made a difference? I'm really pleased with that. Can you single out a couple of them?
Oh, gosh, I can think of a whole bunch. But, I mean, it's been a collective thing of solving little problems and setting goals and institutionalizing, as I say, for the city what people want. And what we're seeing right now is people want some say in what's going on with the planning. And over the years, we've found that that's been true on several different things. And starting with, let's just start with the parks dedication ordinance. And we have a city where the community came together. We did an initiative. We require 5 acres of usable recreational open space per 1,000 new residents. And other cities who didn't do that are stuck with the state law, which says they can only require the developments to require 3 acres. Anyway, it's a long story, but that got put into our city planning because of people who got together and saw that was a need. And we did what's called the traffic phasing ordinance. And I have to say that I do think that's making a difference. What we made a mistake about was we didn't carry on an initiative. We started to, and then we didn't finish because the council was willing to enact it, which means that the council can then change it anytime they want to, which they have done. And so it's been eroded a little bit, but I do think from the standpoint of our city versus others, it has set a standard that's been very helpful.
Well, it's been a remarkable career. I mean, my hat's off to you because I know personally the kind of time and energy you put into it, and I know that I think that what we see here in your discussion, when I said, give me a highlight, what you're saying is these incremental things. I think most of us like to have here's the wall, we knock it down, and then we go home. And it isn't that way usually. It's, let's take this inch, and then let's try to make another inch. And you have been very good at that, of not getting discouraged and being willing to work with different people and keep your eye on it. And really the neat thing about Jean that I think a lot of people don't realize is, as I say, she is, if I would want to do something involving the environment, the first phone call I make is to Jean, get her blessing. But she, who could just be sitting here and telling us all, now you go here and you go here, doesn't do that. She still takes minutes. If someone can't take the minutes, Jean takes the minutes. If someone needs to send out an agenda, Jean will send out the agenda. So that's really staying in the trenches long after most people would. So thank you so much for all that you have done.
And thank you as well. It's been my pleasure, as you say.